very excited to introduce tonight's speaker, Stephen Abram. Stephen Abram is a leading international librarian and a lighthouse thinker in the North American library community. Stephen has extensive experience in library technology and trend forecasting and over 30 years of work experience. Currently, he's the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships and Markets, please correct me if I get any of this wrong, at Gale Cengage Learning, who we wish to thank for their generous sponsorship of this program. Named one of the movers and shakers in the field by Library Journal, Stephen has served as the president of SLA and as the president of the Canadian and Ontario Library Associations. He has received numerous honors and awards, including SLA's highest honor, the John Cotton Dana Award. Stephen is the author of ALA Edition's best-selling Out Front with Stephen Abram, a guide for information leaders, and he writes a blog, Stephen's Lighthouse, which everybody should check out, which is a great source for library trends and information. Tonight, Stephen will explore some of these trends and provide his insight on how we can prepare ourselves and our libraries for the rapidly changing environment. We hope to have time for informal conversation and questions as well. If you could just hold your questions to the end, that would be really appreciated.
Oh, just shout out.
What's that?
Just shout out, it won't come.
Oh, okay, just shout out. Without further ado, let's hear what Stephen has to say about being future ready. Stephen Abram.
You guys know I'm ADHD, and seeing Bunsen burner of gas here is just, I really want to light it. Stephen forgot his remote control, so I'm going to have to stand here to make the slides go forward. But it's an interesting time for those of us in libraries. I'm going to talk about some of the big trends. I've been responsible for about $150 million worth of projects in the last couple of years because we're in the various companies I'm in. And this is one of the more interesting things. Like in my company, we have 700 librarians on staff. So we're probably one of the largest employers of librarians in the world. My last company, we had 300 librarians on staff and a software publisher at SUNY University. We occasionally expanded to have 200 librarians. You want the lights down in a second?
We're finding lights.
They're right here. I'll get the lights in a second. You're not learning unless you're making mistakes. Why best practices don't work. They just don't.
Sorry.
Sorry. So I just wanted to talk about the diversity of vision, opinion, opportunity that we need to think about and how we do things. Librarians tend to tell each other lies and stories that are not true. They say, hey, we're collaborative. They're not. I work in the private sector where we make profits. I have never seen more competition between two libraries that don't even have anything to compete on. It's unbelievable. And we say things like, all this world's happening to us. We're fated. The future happens to you, and it's like a steamroller coming at you. Meanwhile, it's what we invented. Those of you who know the story of George Boole, the guy who invented Boolean logic, did they tell you this was Boole? How many of you are students? I figured it was most of you. Yeah. How many of you are practicing librarians? How many of you are just interested? Or both. Good. It helps if you're a practicing librarian and you're still interested. Yeah. The burnout factor can sometimes drive us crazy. So George Boole quit school in grade 6, went to the library, and the librarians got him books into library loan things, and he invented Boolean logic. The librarians showed him how to publish his articles, and it became too embarrassing to Oxford and Cambridge, so they gave him honorary PhDs. Because no one should really know that the People's University, the library, can help you invent the most transformational logic and math that underpins everything in our systems as librarians. So we help do that. How many of you have heard of Sergey? I met Sergey and Larry when they were, you might probably know them, they did a little thing called Google. You know that they were working on a PhD dissertation and what inspired Google? ISI citation indicators of the popularity of an article, because the head of the library school there invented ISI citation indicators, Eugene Garfield. So they wouldn't have gotten the inspiration for Google unless they had met a librarian. Yahoo Jane Dysart and I were organizing a conference in New York, and it sort of went really well. It was called Internet World before the bubble burst. And we got 135,000 people to the Javits Center. We had to put tents on the outside, and we had exhibits, and we made a lot of money. And we went to this table, and there was this table there with a little tent card with magic marker written on it, and it said Yahoo. And behind the table was Jerry and David, just sort of halfway out of Stanford. And they said, well, what do you do? Because no one had ever heard of Yahoo at the time. That's how old I am. And they said, oh, we invented yet another hierarchically oriented object. And I said, okay, what's that? Because they're systems professionals, so they can't speak English or communicate well. And David doesn't talk because he's so introverted and shy, but Jerry does all the talking for both of them. And he says, well, yeah, it's working really good, and we've got this directory of the web. And it was in the early days of the web. This was like 1996. And he said, but it's starting to fall apart. We've rebuilt it twice, and we don't know how to fix it. So we're hoping that at this conference we can find somebody who can teach us to fix it. And I said, well, you mean well, he says, yeah, you know, like you build a thing and you call banking, and then you find out there's 6,000 websites in banking, so you had to split it into savings banks and whatever. Yeah. He said, well, you keep doing that, and it's getting really hard. And I said, oh, you made a newbie mistake. Every librarian knows that you get the biggest taxonomy you can. Even if you only have 500 books, you still use the Library of Congress. So what is this Library of Congress? And where do I find this library? And so we helped him hire 85 librarians who we had to report to SUNY, and they rebuilt Yahoo so they had a sustainable directory structure that wasn't going to fall apart. So Yahoo, Google, Boolean logic, we sort of had something to do with building this stuff that we're seeing as threatening now. The Google Books project, all this stuff. There's a bunch of really interesting stuff going on. OCLC WorldCat, that the last time librarians collaborated well, 1973, when we got OCLC put together and built all the catalog cards, right? So when you build Amazon, how does Amazon work? They license WorldCat for it. How does Google Books work? They license WorldCat. How does Barnes & Noble work? They license WorldCat. They like to say, okay, we have I forget what it is, there's a number, and it's like 18.4 million unique records for all the books we got. I'm going, that's nice. And they said, we're getting 18 different sources. That's nice. Except the number you just quoted is the exact same number as there are records in the WorldCat. You can't fool me, I'm a librarian. Look it up. And so we've got this challenge right now about how do we participate in this next round of change. And it's going to be really interesting because there's some real challenges for us. So now I will, I want this one. There, now for me. You can see the slide there. Look at this. And this is the librarian problem. What do you see? What's wrong with that picture? Just text. That's a real big issue for us. Information, our stock and trade, not books, but information, only becomes knowledge in people's heads through one process. And that process is called learning, not reading. If you're in an education faculty here, so you know that we've been observing Bloom's taxonomy of learning styles for many years. So we know there's 7 ways that people learn, right? Intrapersonal, interpersonal, mathematical, logical, experience-based, auditory, physical, whatever. This is important. In the last few years, in the Human Genome Project, we found all the genes for this. So we found a set of genes for reading, we found a set of genes for music, we found a set of genes for experience-based learning. If you're a librarian, about 80% of librarians, their dominant profile, genomic profile, is reading. Real populations of people, it's about 20% of them have reading as their dominant learning style. So if we really care about getting information of all types and respect all types of information to become knowledge, we better get better at managing the variety of learning styles. My friend up here is in a K-12 school. In a K-12 school, you have the full range of learning styles. You move into an accounting firm, you find out very quickly that they don't have the full range of learning styles. But if you're going into a hospital and you're talking to your cardiac surgeon, And he's going to open your chest up the next day. And you're a little nervous, so he comes in to calm you down. Do you want him to say, or her to say, I read the article last night? No, you want him to be just like a car mechanic who can come up to a car and see it, hear it, smell it, and know it's a manifold. Because they have that sixth sense that professionals have when they're doing something. You know, if you've got a cardiac surgeon, you want that cardiac surgeon to have done at least 1,000 operations. Because any cardiac surgeon who's done 1,000 operations has about 5 times more success than a cardiac surgeon who hasn't. And you also want him to do it on a Tuesday or to a Friday, not on Monday, or on a weekend, or her. So you're looking at a variety of different learning styles and how people do things. So now we're looking at a world where ebooks are going to be very different. And that's the opportunity. We make tons and tons and tons of compromises in the book space in order to adapt to the book. And so there's certain books that work in text really well. So if you keep the fiction model in your head, fiction works really well in text. And it works really well on e-readers. And it works really well on people having an immersive experience that happens in their imagination while they're sitting quietly in a comfortable chair or on the subway or whatever. That is not where you're getting most of your answers. When you go into librarianship, you're generally working with nonfiction, you're working with reference databases and reference books and a bunch of stuff like that. You're working with asynchronous, asymmetrical texts that involve very different ways for learning to happen. Why did Adobe Acrobat buy Macromedia Flash? And Harry Potter opens the book of spells. It's got the spell recipe on one side and the video of the wizard on the page showing them how to do it. Pretty awesome. What should a book look like if you don't have to make a compromise in 2 dimensions? When you're looking at a book on genomics and you want to read stuff, because reading's not a bad thing. Librarians are in favor of reading, not books. And if we don't stop defending the book, which doesn't need defending anyway, oh my God, books are at risk. Oh yeah, okay, that's why library circulation is up, book sales are up, there are more books published than have ever been published before. Like, exactly find me some evidence that the book is at risk or that reading is at risk. You can sit there and like, boys read more than girls now, because you've got to count all the reading, and you got to get into the video games. You know, girls eventually get into video games when they're about 35 and they start throwing Farmville cows at you. Because the dominant video game model is middle-aged women. Video games outsell all book, periodical, and newspaper publishing combined. It's the biggest economic publishing entity. And I'm from the 3rd largest publishing company in the world. So we wish we had the revenue of a video game entity. I think Angry Birds alone would blow out our revenue piece.